Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for your time.
Hello.
As always, we've got a different new webinar for you today, an area that we really haven't explored. Obviously, as I discussed when we did the webinar with ARC a few months ago, that startups, entrepreneurship, innovation's a really big area that we're focusing on, and this is our first piece around that entrepreneurial thinking. So I've got AJ Kalatunga with us today. Look, the rapid advancements of technology and consequent change in consumer behaviour are absolutely presenting an opportunity to engage in a new area of business and make it better. But that needs a different frame of mind, and that's what we're really here to explore today. As I'm not going to go into too much of the spiel because it's all up to AJ today. But look, thanks for your time, everyone. As always, use your Q&A section to ask questions throughout. We've allowed a lot of time for that, as we anticipate that would be. But enjoy, and over to you, AJ.
Thanks so much, Ross. So, hi, everyone. Okay, so I'll give you just a really quick spiel about who I am and what I do, because I'm aware that pretty much none of you know who I am, and you've jumped on this purely because ACS is providing so much value to your membership. So just quietly, I'm a professional speaker on entrepreneurial thinking. And what that means is that my presentations are used by business leaders to help them elevate their thinking and think more about how to do things differently. And you'll hear a little bit about what sort of things I talk to them about. I've been a professional speaker for a long time, and the reason why I'm a professional speaker was that I started an IT consulting firm back in the day, and there was a little story about how I started that. So I started speaking, and then I've evolved over the years into what you see in front of you today. So the ACS and I have had an amazing relationship. I owe them so much because they were there right at the start of my career. So this is full circle for me, and I'm deeply honored to serve all of you today. So with that in mind, that's who I am, that's what I do. Let's kick off, and I'm going to challenge your thinking a little bit, and hopefully at the end of it, you'll start to see things differently. And it's such an incredible world that we live in today, and let's explore and see where it takes us. Okay, so first thing I want to talk to you about is this little fella. It's the humble bumblebee. Now, quick story. In 1934, scientists sat down and they analyzed the humble bumblebee. And in their infinite scientific wisdom, they came to the conclusion that its little tiny wings cannot generate enough lift for its big, massive body. So as a result, due to the laws of physics, the scientists conferred that the bumblebee cannot fly. But the thing is, the bumblebee doesn't know the laws of physics. So it continues to fly quite happily. Now, the reason why I tell you that is because so much of the world we live in today, and indeed our jobs and our careers and our environments, if you will, it's surrounded by rules, or it's governed by rules and regulations, and they have its place. But sometimes it's very hard to think outside of those rules and think outside of those policies and procedures if you really want to solve problems. So my first question to you all is, what rules are preventing you from seeing what's possible? And for the rest of this webinar, my hope is that you'll be the bumblebee. You'll forget what's already out there and just go on the journey with me for the next half an hour or so and really explore what's possible. Don't be the scientist for the next half an hour, right? Be the bumblebee. Okay, so first things first. What is entrepreneurship? Let's explore that. So I'm going to give you about 20 seconds now to really think about what you think entrepreneurship actually is. So using the chat screen, not the Q&A section on this webinar, use the chat screen and type in, what do you think entrepreneurship is all about? Or what do you think an entrepreneur is? So 20 seconds, go. Check it out. Start typing, guys. And let's see what answers we get. What is entrepreneurship? Ross, you better be thinking about this too, man. Andrea, thank you. Love it. Keep it coming, guys. What is entrepreneurship? Beautiful, Mike. Love that. Love those two answers. Love it. We definitely have the mindset here. Okay, Gia or Gia, maybe? I'm sorry, I don't know how to pronounce your name, but thank you so much for your answers. Karen, oh, that's a really interesting answer. So I'm just going to verbalize all this stuff for those of you who can't read the screen. We've got Andrea, problem solver. Mike says, bringing new concepts to market. Simon Wong is running a business to satisfy customer needs, not just the job. I love that. Entrepreneurship is when you set up a business. Thank you, Gia. Karen, someone from the cutting edge of leading innovation. Anradha, starting something of your own and something unique. Oksana, making the impossible possible. Oh, I love that. Okay, guys, got enough answers. Thank you so much. Sarab, thank you so much. All right, Ross, what do you think an entrepreneur is, my friend? Now, forget we've been hanging around each other for a while, but what do you think an entrepreneur is?
Look, to me, it's taking something that's working the way it does and giving it new life, looking at it through new eyes, innovating it, creating a new business platform experience out of it. I think what we've done with ACS here in the last couple of years has been quite entrepreneurial.
Incredibly entrepreneurial.
And we're still doing the same thing, and we've still got the core products, but we've just positioned it differently. We've tailored it to suit the different needs of the markets and industries, and just kind of explored how that fits into those particular areas, not go, here's ACS and this is what we do. Yeah, it's brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. And all of you are right to a certain extent. Now, being the bumblebee that I am, I have a different sort of view about entrepreneurship. A lot of people think entrepreneurship is about starting a business and making money. And that's really not the case. And the reason why I believe that was when I started my IT consulting firm, I had no clue about business. Yeah, I'd had a few ventures here and there, but nothing really concrete. But what I did have was a lot of technical skills and abilities. And then it was up to me to learn how actually the mechanics of business and to grow my consulting firm and take it to where I took it. Through that journey, I started to realize that earlier on, I thought just because I started the business, I thought I was an entrepreneur. And as I became more aware of the mechanics of business and looking at actually how entrepreneurs do things, I realized that entrepreneurship is something so different to business. And here's my definition of what it means to be an entrepreneur. Entrepreneurship isn't about business. It's about how you think. That's all it is. It's about how you think. And if you have a look at, and I'm actually going to tell you, I'll describe how all entrepreneurs think. And when you see the framework, you'll see, oh, wow, I never looked at it like that. And all entrepreneurs think in exactly the same way, and you'll see that shortly. But it's really about how you think, how you see the world around you, and what you do about that. It's about, like you said, solving problems, making the impossible possible. You know, it's about all that stuff, but it's really about how you think. And it's interesting. So one of the questions that I use to give an example of the differences, one of the questions I use to find out if someone's a business owner or an entrepreneur is I'll pose the question, heaven forbid, if you lost everything, and you had to rebuild your empire from scratch, what's the first thing you would do the next morning when you got up? And I'll listen very carefully to their answers. And the last time I asked that question, I was in a meeting and I was in the audience. I wasn't speaking then, but I was in the audience, and there was a very successful entrepreneur up on stage, and it was a bit of a panel. And I posed that question to him, and he just laughed. He said, "Oh man, I'd be stuffed. I don't know what I'd do. I'd be stuffed, and you know that'll be it." And every single one of them in the room laughed because it was a funny comment. 6 months down the track, that guy filed for bankruptcy. He didn't think. He's been in business about 30 odd years, and he's filed for bankruptcy. And I knew instantly he wasn't an entrepreneur. He's a business owner. And you'll see as we develop in this webinar, as we progress through this webinar, you'll see the differences in the thinking. So the reason why I believe entrepreneurship is about how you think, like the story I just mentioned, society today, people don't think because they don't realize that they have to. And I've got so many examples of this, and we catch up quite often. So you've heard of some of my frustrations. You know, I got something so simple like I love my chocolate sundaes. Heaven forbid, I love my chocolate sundaes, right? And the last time I ordered a chocolate sundae, they gave it to me with a fork to eat it. You know, like it's just and the reason why they gave me a fork was that they
they ran out of spoons, but they didn't tell me that. You know, and when you don't think as a business person, you risk alienating your customers, you know. So people don't think, and I've got so many stories about this, you know, but people don't think. But probably the most relevant story that I want to share with you to highlight why you actually do need to think is this next story. So I don't know if anyone knows what this building is. Do you know what this building is?
No, it looks like a hotel.
Yeah.
Looks like a hotel,
in Vegas. Yeah, cool. Do any of you know what this building is? Quickly, just type it into the chat. Hopefully someone does. Let's see if anyone knows what this building is. But this building represents a setting for the story. Okay, it doesn't look like anyone knows what it is. So let me just tell you. It is the Moscow State University. And up on top right here, I don't know if you can see my cursor, everyone, but up on top right here at the top, you see a little star. And then this long sort of object below the star is called a spire. Okay, so here's the story, okay? So two candidates go in for a job interview. The first candidate goes in and performs amazingly, and the lecturer asks them, how tall is the spire on this building? And the candidate thinks to himself and goes, right, okay, Professor, I actually know the answer to this question because we studied it in architecture class. The spire is exactly 57 meters tall. Professor goes, great, thanks for coming. Don't call us, we'll call you, because that's how they roll in Moscow, right? Second candidate comes in, same story, right? Amazing interview. And then at the end, the professor asks her, how tall is the spire on the main building? And she says, listen, Professor, hand on my heart, I don't know the answer, but if you will just give me 5 minutes, I'm pretty sure I can work it out for you. Now the professor's intrigued, so he gives her the 5 minutes. She goes, thank you. So she runs out the door, down the corridor, out through the doors, straight outside to the main lawn. And she looks at her watch, looks at the sun, you know, looks at the shadow of the spire along the ground, takes some paces, and she measures how long the spire is, runs through some calculations in her head, and she comes back to the professor. And she says, Professor, the spire is approximately 56 to 58 meters tall. Now, my question to all of you here, all of us, is that who do you think is the better candidate for that job? So who do you think is the better candidate for that job? Number one or number two? And while you're pondering that question, two. Interesting. Two yeah. Great work, Karen. Two. Now, let me, before I say who would be the better candidate, let me tell you the process that both these candidates did. The first one answered that question only because they had specific knowledge. And because they had that specific knowledge, they were able to answer the question. The second one didn't have the specific knowledge, but they knew enough. They had a mindset, skills, and abilities to work out the answer. Now, what's interesting about all of this is that, I don't know, maybe even 10, 15 years ago, the world rewarded you for knowledge because it was a very static world that we lived in. There were questions that had answers. But the world we live in today is completely different. You know, the world that we live in today is completely different. And a lot of people out there, there's so much constant change, volatility, uncertainty. So how do you operate in such an environment? You can't, because that static knowledge that you once had and were rewarded for is no longer relevant. It's not enough. And that's such an important thing to keep in mind, that, you know, and you'll see elements of that, which is what this whole presentation is all about. Thinking differently or elevating your thinking. So important. So let's keep going. As you know, the world has changed, okay? And there's so many examples out there, and we all know it in our hearts, right? But one of the best examples that the world has changed and that we need to do things differently is this. Your phone is now just an app on your phone. That just blows my mind. For those of you who've been around a while, you remember the rotary dial phones, right? I saw it in a museum. No, I'm kidding. Right? I'm kidding. But this one little device, you know, we still call it a phone, but technically it's not. And that's just going to get even more different over the next few years as it evolves, as we evolve to this device. So I think what we need to look at is, for this world that we live in today, and to prepare ourselves for the future, we really need to shift our thinking and really do things differently. Now, I want to shift gears slightly and talk to you about how most companies have viewed this changing world, and they're calling it digital disruption. Now, I want to have a conversation with all of us here about the illusion of digital disruption. And when you really think about it, okay, everyone's talking about technology. Everything's changed. Like I just mentioned the phone, you know, that's different. But what is actually driving this disruption? And the notion that it's called digital disruption in itself is slightly misleading, because when you really look at it and examine it a little bit deeper, you realize that it's not really about the technology, because technology has always been an enabler. There's something else driving it. And to examine what is really driving this, you have to look at, well, how exactly is everything being disrupted? How exactly is everything being disrupted? So Ross, who's one of your favorite disruptors as an organization?
Oh, I was talking about Kodak.
Kodak. Oh my God.
Yeah.
All right, Kodak. So they're not a disruptor at the moment.
No.
They will be.
Yeah.
But they could be. So the famous disruptors, as all of us know, you know, the Ubers, the Airbnbs, and that sort of stuff. You know, that have been around forever. But they're like, you know, whatever. Now, the reason why all of those companies have disrupted something is because they challenge the status quo. They challenge the status quo. And the thing is, right, for years and years and years, these established companies have had a set way of doing things. And unfortunately, the customer themselves have evolved over time. They have different needs. But what you found is that even though the customers evolved, the companies that are providing solutions to their problems, which are what products and services are, haven't met up with them, kept up with them. And because of that, there's a disconnection in the customer experience and what they desire. And that turns into a dissatisfaction. And if you examine that deeper, you'll see that a lot of markets, the customers are really putting up with a lot of things because there's no other alternative. You know, a great example is the taxi industry, right? For years, customers have had to put up with terrible, terrible experiences. And then Uber comes along and all of a sudden they're a disruption, you know. So it's actually, the illusion of digital disruption, it's actually because of a human element. It's the customer element. So this whole world is being disrupted because these startups and these entrepreneurs have come in and said, you know what, we're going to build something different. And you can predict any industry that's going to be disrupted simply by looking at one thing. Where are customers tolerating levels of products and services? And you can, and as entrepreneurs, and this is what all startups do, you know, they all look at how to solve a problem. Right, so we're entrepreneurs and you know, looking at customers that are dissatisfied and they're putting up with stuff. Prime markets for disruption. So when you look at the lenses through that, let's go in a little bit deeper. Now, what corporations do, the response to this digital disruption is that because they think it's technology driven, they go, right, we need to be more innovative. We need to drive innovation and change. So here are three possible solutions that they use for corporate innovation, or three possible alternatives that have been embraced. The first one is digital transformation. And you'll see that the word transformation has gone a bit wonky at the end, because it's one of those things where business leaders have made the decision to, yes, we need to digitally transform our services and become more relevant, driven by technology. The thing is, though, that if you have a look at each digital transformation project across an industry or across several companies, they're all different. They're not driven by the same set, right? And that's because there's different types of digital transformation. There's transformation that you know, updates systems, you know, old archaic systems. There's transformation that's designed to be more agile. There's digital transformation that's designed to be built around customers, which is a good thing, but I'll come back to that. So everyone's doing this thing. They're seeing the solution to the problem of disruption is we need transformation. We need to become more digital. You know, we need to become more mobile enabled with all these devices. But they're forgetting the core reason of disruption is taking care of your customers. Okay, so another Another thing that they do is, I'm calling it seducing startups, okay? Because they've seen all these startups being disrupted. So they've seen Uber, Airbnb, all these other popular startups that are disrupting the status quo. And these corporate leaders are thinking, hey, we need to think and act more like a startup, and they're going and doing that, right? So what they're doing is they're setting up, corporate startup accelerators, right? And they're setting up corporate innovation labs, and it's all about, we're supporting startups, and what does a startup want to hear? That, oh my God, this massive corporate is supporting us to do stuff, okay? But the thing is, like, it's all like they're all jumping into bed together, but not looking at lasting relationships, you know what I mean? And the reason why I say that is if you dig deeper into every single corporate partnership with startups, right? It's a very new thing, of course, but it's not getting the right traction. Now, there are always exceptions to the rule, and I'm sure if you dig hard enough, you'll always find an exception to that rule. But in general, it just doesn't work, because they're looking at it as a startup that accelerates just an R&D lab, or they'll produce some products or services and we'll grab that and make it part of our offering, whatever. And it just doesn't work. It just doesn't work. And recently, in fact, try this yourself after this webinar, right? Go Google Qantas Innovation Lab. Okay, I did this a couple of days ago. And there's a couple of entries in there from last year, about a year ago, right? And it's all these press releases from Qantas saying, we want to embrace startups. We want to focus on startups because startups are the future, and they've got the innovation. They're going to drive it all, right? And then there's one entry in there that says, Qantas Innovation Lab closes, right? And they just closed a couple of weeks ago, right? But the juxtaposition of this on the single Google search page, it's really interesting just to see those two comments, and don't get me wrong, Qantas and all these other big companies, they're all fantastic companies, right? They've just gotten the strategy wrong because they haven't taken the time to fully understand digital disruption. So that's the other thing. The other thing they do is design thinking, which is basically innovation theater, as we say in industry. Okay, so you walk into a room, there's full of post-it notes, there's wall charts or whatever. But the thing is, if you really want to change the world, right, design thinking will give you the ideas, but it's not enough. Ideas itself are not enough. It's interesting, whenever I meet a small business client, not in Australia, Australians are pretty switched on like this, but let's say I talk to an American client, right, a small business, an aspiring entrepreneur, first thing they'll say to me, you got to sign a non-disclosure agreement. And I say, okay, well, if you're not willing to tell me about the idea, I just... and if I sign it and I love it, I can't tell anyone about it. And if they ask me for help, how can I, run to my network and say, hey, you need to talk to this person, My network's full of VCs, speakers, clients, corporate clients, it's just, that's part of my offering for small business owners, right? But I just can't do it, right? And the reason why is because they just, ideas are worthless. It's the implementation of the ideas that bring the value. And that's so incredibly powerful to make that distinction. So design thinking is great. I've seen a lot of big corporates use design thinking and put up photos on Instablar and the Bookface and LinkedIn and all that. Great, you're thinking. But what about the implementation? So that leads us to our next point, which is how do you actually navigate digital disruption? And there's only one really concrete way, because all these other methods, they're not sustainable. The one method that really is to really think like an entrepreneur. And remember our definition of what an entrepreneur is. Someone, it's really about how you think about things. And I hope that you've got a sense of how I think about things. And I hope that at the end of this webinar, you take that thinking and you start to examine your own circumstances, whether you're in corporate or whether you're starting a small business. Not a small business, starting a business, or if you're trying to manage innovation within a corporate, really start to think about things differently and think like an entrepreneur. And that's the only way to do it. The only way to build sustainable change and drive innovation is to think like an entrepreneur and create a culture of entrepreneurship. Let me explore that a little bit deeper. Okay, so this is what I call the entrepreneurial mind, and it's a framework that I've been working on for about, 10, 15 years really, since I started in business. Now, full disclaimer, when I started in business, like I said, I had no clue about business. I just had a very strong technical ability. And so I was doing this model. I just didn't realize what I have. And so a few years ago, I sat down and I thought, okay, what exactly is crystallizing? How do I crystallize my thinking around this? So this to me is how all entrepreneurs think in terms of ideas and outcomes. Okay. And all entrepreneurs turn ideas into outcomes. Okay. But if that was so simple, right, everyone would be an entrepreneur. So what you find in between the idea and the outcome are these things called barriers. Okay. And they prevent an idea from ever turning into an outcome. Now, the good news in my time of working with this model, there's only 3 barriers that you really need to pay attention to. The first barrier is your internal barriers. That's that little voice in your head that sort of has that self-doubt and says, I don't know if I can do this. What makes you think you can do this when you've got 2 socks on your feet? That's different. That little niggling little voice, and you need to squash it. You need to build up self-confidence in yourself and your abilities to really think differently around the world around you, okay? And once you do that, things change. Now, once you build up your internal, once you squash that internal barrier and you build up self-confidence, the next step that you need to do is look at your external barriers. Now, external barriers, there's a whole bunch of them. Most of the time, it's how do you communicate this idea out there to the rest of the world to get people to buy into it? So like I said, design thinking, brilliant. You come up with all these innovative ideas to solve problems, fantastic. Okay, but the next thing is you got to implement them. And the first step of implementation, as you know, is to communicate those ideas in a way to get stakeholders to buy into them, whether that's your manager, your co-workers, your C-suite executives, right? So communication is a big external barrier. People just don't know how to communicate an idea in such a way to get it out there. So that's an external barrier. Sometimes external barriers could be financial. We just don't have the budget to do this, or the budget's been allocated, and we can't make the numbers work. Okay. External barriers could also be legal. We could all make a lot of money doing a lot of dodgy stuff, but we don't. So it could be external. As I found out the hard way, another external barrier is political. When I did an overseas speaking tour, I ran into a lot of political barriers and had to navigate those. So, there's a whole bunch of external barriers out there. So you need to conquer your external barriers. Now, when you've got your internal barriers conquered and you believe in yourself and your ideas and your abilities, and then you know how to communicate the idea out there in such a way to get budget and buy-in and everything else, the last barrier you're going to strive to overcome is that sometimes, no matter how hard you try, you're going to have a terrible idea and it's never going to work, right? And, I've got so many examples of that, which I'll share at another time, but you all know this. You've seen these ideas that come up and everyone gets around them and all of a sudden they fail. And that's because the idea itself isn't quite right. And it just needs a little refinement, or it needs a little tweaking. And you need to develop a culture of experimentation from that idea. And that's how you do it. And when you really sort of get all these things humming and you squash those internal barriers, you squash those external barriers, and you bulletproof your idea, you will always, always achieve your outcome. And what's interesting is that corporations now need to build up a culture that supports ideas. It supports people, building up self-confidence in themselves and their abilities to think differently and to articulate that thinking. You need a culture to voice these ideas and not feel like, that you're safe to voice these ideas. And you need to build up a culture of looking at, well, okay, how can we make this idea work? And you need to build up a culture where, coming up with ideas is a great thing, and supporting outcomes too. Now, what is so interesting in my work with the corporates is that most companies, that's all they want. That's all they talk about, the outcomes. That's what they're giving you. And now you've seen the entire model, you know how to achieve outcomes. It's these things, but rarely do they have all these other support mechanisms in place to achieve that. That's a concern. So the entrepreneurial mind, if you take nothing else away from this webinar, people, I really hope that you embrace this entrepreneurial mind and this framework, because this is how all entrepreneurs think. Every single entrepreneur on the planet. Let me give you an example. Richard Branson, right? When he started Virgin Airlines, he was in an airport I can't remember where he was. I think he was in Heathrow, perhaps, or some other island. I can't remember exactly where. But he's flying off to the Virgin Islands to meet his lovely new lady friend at the time, right? And the airport has just cancelled the flight. So he's stranded there. And what he does is he quickly says, no way am I going to miss out on this, right? So what he does is he runs and he charters a plane, a private plane, okay? So that's his idea. Now, if we take that through the framework, the internal barriers, he had self-confidence in order to do that. Externally, he was able to communicate that idea to get, you know, the check-in counter to give him a plane. And then what he did brilliantly was that he found a sandwich board and wrote down, you know, the price of a ticket. And then he walked up and down the airport selling tickets to the Cayman Islands, right?
That's the entrepreneur.
Yeah, you see what I mean? Yeah,
wow.
right. And so he buys the plane, he buys the resource, and then he farms it out. You know, it reduces the risk, right? And you know, and his idea was a good one, and that's how Virgin Airlines started. You know, Elon Musk wants to solve traffic congestion. That's the outcome. What's his idea? I'm going to dig holes down underneath the city of LA, right? It's just ridiculous thinking, you know. And internally, he has self-confidence in himself and his abilities, you know. So that wasn't a barrier for him. He knew how to communicate the idea to get permits to dig under the city, you know. And the idea, he's exploring it. Like he's talking about all these little experiments, and he's just completed the tunnel, one part of the tunnel, you know. And he's going to achieve that outcome. And through all of that, he's just got that culture in place in those who surround him, you know. And it's that's what I mean. Like you just give me any single entrepreneur and they all think in exactly the same way of ideas, barriers, and outcomes. And that's how I see the world too. And when people talk to me and share their ideas with me, I'm looking at, okay, what is their challenges? Is it internal? Is it external? Or does their idea need refinement? You know, just that's it. That's really it. All right, let's keep moving. So let me give you some examples of what happens when you think like an entrepreneur. You change the world. You change the world. Now, that's a pretty big statement, but in my definition of the world, it could be someone's world. It could be an organization's world. It could be a community world. It could be a family world, right? But this is what I mean. Like that framework that I just shared with you, the entrepreneur mind, has multiple levels of application. You know, it works throughout the organization. It works. I've used that model when I talk to students at high schools and students at universities. You know, I've used that model to build my career up. It's just applicable all over the place, you know. So that's what I mean by change the world. But let me go explore some examples with you. Okay, so first thing, General Electric. Okay, so this example relates to product development. I'm not too sure how many of you work for corporates or how many of you work for businesses or how many of you are students or how many are, you know, just all sorts of stuff, right? So I'm going to give you a wide variety of examples, and if there's something that you want to ask me more questions about, let's catch up at the end and run through some questions. So, okay, so first things first, General Electric. Once upon a time, General Electric was building this engine, okay, called the Series X engine. And the usual development time was 6 years. Now, GE started implementing a methodology called the Lean Startup, the Lean Startup Way. And it's a methodology developed by Eric Ries, who's a Lean Startup coach. He's the founder of the corporate Lean Startup, okay? So he came on, worked with GE, and through entrepreneurial thinking for product development, he reduced the 6-year turnaround to under 6 months for a working prototype. And the engine was production ready in 2 years. Now, when you think about cash flow cycles of General Electric, yeah, they're a massive company. They've got a whole bunch of stuff, but this was just one product unit, okay? And it went from 6 years from development to getting into the customer's hand down to 2 years. So that's a massive impact, okay? And that's just one product, okay? Imagine if they rolled out this methodology throughout the whole organization. Now, for those of you who actually know the story about GE, full disclaimer, okay? Full disclaimer, completely upfront and honest with you. They went hard in rolling out this new methodology throughout the company. And unfortunately, through corporate decisions and all that, and activist investors, there was a leadership change. And the last I heard was that the new leadership team got rid of all this other stuff because they were chasing shareholder value. So That doesn't mean that the methodology doesn't work. It's just the implementation wasn't right for what the company wanted with the stakeholders and all that. So please still continue to think of this as an example, but just know that GE is no longer using that methodology. The last I heard, I haven't looked at it recently, but the last I heard, which was about 6 or 7 months ago, that everything's changed. So let's keep going. Okay, next example. Hopefully some people know what this is, but for those of you who don't, this is the Hornsdale Power Station. Hornsdale, I think. I don't know, but I can't remember exactly what it is. But this is the people know it colloquially as the Tesla battery farm in South Australia. Okay. Now the story behind this is that this was built on top of a tweet between two very successful entrepreneurs in Australia. And they were dissatisfied with all the power issues in the southern end of the country and whatever. And as a joke, one Tesla executive tweeted something along the lines of, if Australia used a Tesla battery farm, they wouldn't be having these problems. And then Mike Cannon-Brookes from Atlassian tweeted back saying, how serious are you? If I could organize the funding, how serious are you? And Elon Musk came back a few seconds later with another tweet saying, how about 100 days or it's free? Is that serious enough? Is that serious enough for you? And so that kicked it off. Now, this energy problem is not a new one. It's been around for ages. And within a space of, I think, I can't remember if it's 18 months or 12 months, this thing was built. And when they ran the numbers, it was an incredible Hornsdale Power Reserve. Thank you so much, Simon.
SA person there.
Yeah. That's beautiful. Thank you so much, guys. Thank you. So this was built off the back of a tweet. And again, this entrepreneurial thinking without looking at what are the rules and the regulations and the policies around this, there's a serious problem here. Let's see if we can solve it. That's the result. And it's actually got amazing results. Look it up, Hornsdale Power Reserve. Thank you, Simon. Okay, let's keep going. I wonder if anyone knows this next place. Okay. This is a factory in Finland during the 1850s. Although we might know this is the company headquarters, right, in the 1850s, although we might know it better as Nokia. Okay, Nokia started off as a mill in the 1850s, 1860s, and we know it as a telecommunications company. And a lot of my speaking colleagues actually call Nokia a failure. And an interesting thing has happened with Nokia. So yes, they failed spectacularly, and there's this whole story about Nokia failing is absolutely amazing, okay? So in 2007, they were a $153 billion company through mobile phones. They were set. All of a sudden, Apple iPhone came out and Android came out, and Nokia actually had internal teams within the organization that were actually looking for disruptive trends, and management just refused to listen to them. Management just thought, you know what? The Apple iPhone, that's a toy. Android, who's going to use Android? People want to hold up phones to their ears and have conversations with people. That was the mindset of the leadership. And you know what? They got it so wrong. In 2012, their market cap went from 153 billion just down to 6 billion. Okay, now you might be thinking, wait, that's still 6 billion. But if you're a $153 billion company and you've wiped off market cap of that amount of money, that's serious trouble, okay? Now, think of this, right? Think of this like being on the Titanic, right? And Nokia always had these two projects going. And the two projects were the Symbian operating system and another operating system called MeeGo or WeGo. I can't remember the exact name. They were the two projects of the company. And when the new CEO came in and he had a look at these two projects, he realized they're complete failures. So the whole organization is centered around these two solid projects that they've been working on for years, and they're flawed. You know, so that was when things started to change, and they sold the phone division to Microsoft, and they're running with it. But then the new CEO came in and he started looking at, well, what does Nokia actually do really well? What have we got? And how can we develop that? it's an interesting trend of what they've done is that they're now in as a communications infrastructure company, and their market cap has gone up to 37 billion in just 5 years. Now they're in health, they're in media, they do a little bit of phones, but they're more about communication infrastructure, and they're amazing. And Ross, just to add to this example, you mentioned Kodak's done something interesting. And I didn't realize exactly what had happened until, 5 minutes ago when Ross spoke to me. But what's actually happened is all these companies that the experts say were relevant and useless, okay, they haven't jumped on the digital trend at all. They missed the boat, and their market cap just died because their leadership refused to accept, refused to think outside the box, okay? But now what's interesting is the change of leaders. The new people have come in and said, right, we missed that boat. What else can we do? And you were saying about Kodak too, how they're coming back with blockchain.
Yeah, they just launched an ICO blockchain.
Yeah, wow.
For amateur and professional photographers to hold everything securely, to watermark it all, and to get transactions instantaneously and get the money. So it's basically put all of the piracy and unscrupulous non-payment behavior. It's just eliminated all that.
Now just think of that for a second, okay? So Kodak missed the digital trends, okay? They have all this amazing history. They missed the digital trends, but now they're coming in with new technology. And think about just this one phrase, right? We're Kodak. We've got such a rich history of connection between people and their cameras. We were part of that revolution. And now, in this world that we live in today, this sense of community and sense of entrepreneurialism, we're there too, supporting the people. Incredibly entrepreneurial thinking. Same thing with Nokia. They missed the boat, but they're catching up. They're building a new ship, basically, and it's proven. And you're going to see more of these comeback stories if the leadership thinks like entrepreneurs. So that's that. So how do we build a culture of entrepreneurship? 3 quick ideas for you. First thing, 1, understand disruption. Really understand disruption. All of you know what disruption is actually now. It's not technology driven at all. It's about people. It's about people. It's more about customers, okay? And if you really understand disruption, it starts to shift the game. Now, I know that we're a technology society here. The Australian Computer Society is heavily technology driven. But remember, technology in its essence is an enabler, okay? And think about it. If you get the tech right, what could you enable? How much potential could we unleash? That's exciting. That's so exciting. So when you look at the human side, understand disruption, that it's actually, customer driven. Next thing, develop a customer focus. There's a popular quote that's floating around the interwebs. It's from Richard Branson, and it says, don't put the customer first. You should always support employees. I really disagree with that. I so disagree with that, okay? Because it assumes a zero-sum game, that if you put customers first, the employees suffer. And if you put employees first, customer suffers, okay? And whenever I'm confuzzled or distracted by a new trend or quote or something, I go back to the fundamentals of business by Peter Drucker. The purpose of business is to create and keep a customer. You could support your employees as much as you want, okay? But if you don't have customers,
They're not having a job.
They're out of a job, right?
Yeah.
But if you dig a little bit deeper, again, elevating your thinking to dig a little bit deeper into that quote, what you find is that actually when employees feel like, you got to put employees first, it's because they felt undervalued, underappreciated, or even they've been fired by company executives, okay? But when you really dig deep into that, you realize that the company executives, they need to raise cash flow. So they're manipulating profit. They're chasing profit. They're not even focused on the customer, right? They're manipulating profit for bonuses. Now, you've got employees throughout the company, but remember, management are also employees. So the whole thing doesn't really work. And plus, if you look at how Branson builds his business and runs his business, he always puts the customer first, but this is just him playing to the crowd, okay? So the thing is, you've got to really develop a customer focus, and perhaps a more useful belief in navigating these challenging times is to really think about how do you develop a customer focus and you engage your employees, everyone, to deliver that customer focus. And the greatest example of that is, of course, Amazon and Jeff Bezos. He's forever built his business around the customer, the evolution of the customer, which is why Amazon is worth $1 trillion valuation. And they were the first company to reach that. Not because they had amazing technology or whatever. Yes, they do have amazing technology, but if you dig deeper into everything, it's because they had this incredibly relentless focus on the customer. That's the opportunity available to all of you and to all businesses and corporations and business leaders out there. Develop a customer focus. Third thing, empower employees to think like entrepreneurs. Now, very practically, let me tell you about this, okay? Very practical. If you're in an organization, here's what you do. It doesn't matter if you're a leader in the organization or you have no title that allows you to do this, right? Find a way to set up a lunch And what you do is you invite all the entrepreneurs within the company to come to lunch. Now, here's the thing. Every single corporation out there, right, they have entrepreneurs sitting in there waiting for such an opportunity. They're just not being activated for whatever reasons, okay? So if you were to step up, and like I said, you don't need a title to step up, find a way to communicate with these entrepreneurs. And if you go to the managers and you ask them, hey, who's the entrepreneur in your unit? They all know. They all know. Find a way to contact these entrepreneurs using a bulletin board or whatever, and just get them to lunch and start sharing pretty much what I've shared with you here. Really think about that. Really, and start that. And through those discussions and through those conversations, you'll start to identify problems that can be solved with entrepreneurial thinking. And some of the things that you can talk to them about are what problems do you have, but also talk to them about these sort of things. These are programs that I run, okay? So talk to them about goal setting, ultimate goal setting and achieving. How do you actually set and achieve goals? How do you manage the negativity of you might understand something, but people around you might not be able to see that and it might be quite negative? How do you make better decisions? How do you speak and present properly? How do you communicate these ideas out there? How do you network properly to build strategic relationships? And how do you bulletproof ideas? So talk to them about all this stuff and build like a little internal entrepreneurial think tank. And that in itself is how you get started. I want to close now with a really quick story. And this is a story about Robert, who's this kid that I met years and years ago when I was speaking at schools.
You can tell with the ACS.
Oh yeah, ACS. I told you, man. I was the biggest brand advocate for ACS back in the day. And like I said, incredible gratitude to the society for what they helped me achieve back in the day, and yeah. So anyway, so I meet Robert. Long story short, he's a kid that's failing school. His teacher rings me up and says, hey, listen, Robert really wants to get a job in IT, but he's only 14 years old and no one else will give him a chance. Do you have anything for him? Because I ran a tech company. And I said, no, I don't. But I remember him and I'm going to go sit down with him. So I sit down with Robert and I say to him, hey, champ, you don't look like the dumbest person around. Why are you failing school? And he says to me, AJ, they give me a compass and a map and they ask me to go out to the beach and find my way back into the classroom. And I said, what's wrong with that? And he goes, well, for the last 6 years, I've been in junior police rangers where they dropped me into a forest and asked me to find my way home. And instantly I got it. Here's a kid that had more ability than what he was being asked to learn. And of course, he was disengaged and disruptive and labeled a delinquent. So I said to him, what do you want to do? And he said, okay, I want to build computers. And I said, great, I have a project for you. And one of the things I did, I used to live in Darwin, and at the time I got quite bored. I would always be quite bored in Darwin, so I'd always do crazy stuff. So I built a technology training center to help business owners start using technology to grow their business. And at the time, nothing like that had been done in Darwin. Now there's stuff like that all over the place, but at the time there was nothing. I didn't want to build computers myself. So Robert came and built these computers for me. And because he did what he did, together we built the center and we trained 160 business owners in how to use technology to grow their business. And it was amazing. And then I taught him to think like an entrepreneur. Okay, so here's where the story takes a bit of a curveball. Okay, so Robert now, he's working for me. He's about 15, 16 years old, and he gets cocky, right? He gets cocky. So I can't tolerate that, so I fired him. Okay, I got rid of him, right? I can't do it. So then, he comes to see me one day, and he says, AJ, I just came to see you to say thank you. I said, thank you for what? For firing you? He goes, no. I just signed 100 clients. He goes, I said, what? You signed 100 clients? How did you do that? Aren't you like 15 years old? He goes, yeah. And then he told me the story of how he did it. And I won't go into it because we're almost out of time, right? But he was incredibly entrepreneurial. A couple of years later, I caught up with this guy, and now he's about 17 years old. And we're at lunch, and I say, how's business going? He goes, oh, that just was hectic. I had to give it up. And then his phone starts buzzing. I was like, what's going on, champ? You got some girlfriends or what? And he was like, nah, they're clients. I said, hang on a second. I thought you said you gave up that business. He goes, yeah, I started another one. I said, you started another one? What are you doing now? He goes, well, here's the story, right? So stupid me was out one night, dropped my phone, smashed the screen, and I had to get it fixed. So I took it into the local shopping center, and AJ, they wanted $600 to fix it. I'm 18. I don't have $600 to fix it. So I hopped on eBay, and I bought this kit for like $100, and I fixed my phone. But stupid me put it on Facebook. Now everyone wants me to fix their phone. I said, you making any money out of this, champ? He goes, a couple of grand. I said, what, a month? Few months? He goes, nah, per week. I'm like, per week? Is that revenue? Is that profit? He goes, what's the difference? It's just crazy, right? Yeah. Fast forward, and he runs his company, and then one day he gives me a call, and he says, AJ, I'm really sorry. I've got to tell you something. Things are pretty rough. I don't know how to move forward. I've got a steady girlfriend now, and I need to eject my business, and I need to go get a job. And I'm sorry because I just feel like I'm really letting you down. And I said to him, champ, you ain't letting me down. I really appreciate your phone call. Thank you so much. But listen to me. Entrepreneurs do whatever it takes. So if you need to get rid of your business and start a job, you have my support and my blessing. And I always got your back, brother. He goes, cool. Thanks so much, man. Thanks so much. And then, so that was that. I caught up with him again. And I said to him, hey, champ, how's the job? And he goes, well, funny story. I thought about what you said, and that thing about entrepreneurs do whatever it takes. So I looked at my business and I realized I didn't have to shut it down. I could actually sell it. So I was like, what? You sold your business? He goes, yeah, he's 21 years old, right? And I said, well, what are you doing now? He goes, well, funny story. The people I sold it to, they don't know how to run the business. So they hired me back as the CEO. Now, the reason why I tell you that story is because Robert's a great example of all of us here today. We're striving to achieve something in our lives, and sometimes we get opportunities, sometimes we don't. But if we can just develop our entrepreneurial mind, life changes. You can change your business, you can change your career, you can change the world. And that's just something that we did together. Here's a kid that was failing school, and we put together Young Entrepreneurs Day to help other kids who are in similar situations. And it was amazing to see what I went through in life and what Robert went through in life. And it's not just the two of us. There's so many out there. So think like an entrepreneur, change your life, change the world. And that's my whole message. The potential is unlimited. The choice is yours. All of the stuff, I'm releasing a new guide called Reimagining Digital Disruption. So if you want the ideas that I've had in this whole presentation and you want some solid ideas to help you implement what we've spoken about, get in touch with me. I'm on the Twitter, the LinkedIn, or the old school email. Send me a pigeon if you want, right? Or go check out my website. Whatever happens in business and in life, I wish you all nothing but incredible success. Thank you all for being a part of this presentation and part of my dreams. Thank you so much.
Wow. Thank you, AJ.
My pleasure.
Very inspirational, mate.
Questions. Well, let's have a look at questions. Let's go here. We got one here.
That was just a response.
Oh, that was a response.
Yep.
Okay, yeah. Any questions while we've got a couple of minutes with AJ?
Hashtag ask me anything. Okay, Muhammad wants to know, can we get a PowerPoint of this webinar? Probably not, but if you want to send me a message, I'll send you the guide, which has got all the stuff in it, Muhammad.
That's the best way.
Yeah.
Yep, absolutely.
Any other questions?
My thoughts would be is everyone going to go and make a small change from today?
Yeah.
At least just a small change, or rethink how you're doing it in business or what you're doing. You know, we can put on a lot of this content and put a lot of this education, but you know, it's like you're saying, it's up to you to implement it and take it the lessons and really drive this new way of thinking.
And ACS is an amazing support group for that. Like, I built my career, you know, thanks to ACS. Like, you know, I cannot express so much enough gratitude for them. You know, and all of you, your members, this is a members only website, so a members only webinar. So reach out to your local ACS representatives and start having these conversations with them. You know, start your own entrepreneurial groups within your organizations.
Yeah.
Implement.
Yeah, great. Excellent. Look, well, if there's no questions, we might keep that as a wrap today. I just think you've really hit the mark with this and
Thank you.
set that mindset a little bit different. Keep an eye out for future content. We will be working with AJ next year on a few things and maybe get you in for an event.
Yeah,
and
more than happy,
yeah, we
man.
love your energy, mate. It's very inspiring.
Thank you. Thank you.
Look, everyone, thank you so much. And there's a bit of feedback coming.
Thank
too,
you. Thank you, Simon. I really appreciate that. And thank you, Stephen. I really appreciate it. Thank you, everyone.
Yeah, no worries. And look, have a good week, everyone. We're wrapping up for the year, but look out for next year and look out for AJ for some of the things we'll be doing. Take care and have a good week, everyone.
See ya. Take care. Bye.